Hey there, storytellers and English enthusiasts. Ever wondered about the man who went from shouting "You're fired" on TV to, well, let's just say a whole lot more? We're talking about Donald J. Trump, a name that's probably popped up in your newsfeed more times than cat videos. Whether you love him, loathe him, or are just perpetually fascinated by the sheer spectacle, his story is one wild ride. So buckle up, because on Story-Driven English, we're diving deep into the surprisingly long and winding tale of this businessman-turned-reality-star-turned-politician. Get ready for a journey filled with towering buildings, even taller, ambitions, and enough plot twists to make your head spin. Let's get started. Let's pull up a comfy chair and really dig into this Trump phenomenon, shall we? It's a tale so outlandish, it could probably be pitched as a sitcom. The Apprentice, White House edition. Our protagonist, Donald J. Trump, didn't exactly emerge from the primordial soup of politics. No, he was already a well-established character in the American consciousness, a larger-than-life figure known for his golden touch, or at least buildings with gold-plated accents. In the world of real estate, think of him as the mogul next door, except his next door was a sprawling penthouse, and his idea of a casual chat involved negotiating multi-million-dollar deals. He was the guy who put his name on everything, like a walking, talking brand. You half expected him to autograph the weather report. Then came the detour into the glitzy world of entertainment. The Apprentice wasn't just a TV show, it was a cultural moment. Suddenly, everyone was walking around saying, "You're fired." With varying degrees of dramatic flair, this show wasn't just about business. It was about the persona of Donald Trump, the decisive, no-nonsense boss who knew how to win. It was like a masterclass in self-promotion, and little did we know, it was just a warm-up act for his biggest role yet. Fast forward to 2015, and bam, our man throws his hat into the political ring. Now imagine the collective head-scratching. Across the nation, it was like seeing your favorite reality TV star decide to become an astronaut. Unexpected, absolutely. Did it grab your attention? You betcha. His campaign was less of a traditional political run and more of a rock concert tour, complete with catchy slogans, "Make America Great Again," passionate rallies, and a communication style that bypassed the usual filters. He spoke directly to people, often in a way that made political pundits clutch their pearls, but resonated with a significant chunk of the electorate. He was the anti-politician, the guy who wasn't afraid to say what was on his mind, even if it meant sparking a Twitter storm the size of a small hurricane. Then came the unthinkable. The guy who'd never held public office was now the leader of the free world. It was like that moment in a movie where the underdog, against all odds, actually wins the big game. Except this game had global implications and involved a lot more paperwork. His presidency was, well, let's just say it wasn't boring. It was a roller coaster of policy changes, international kerfuffles, and enough news headlines to keep cable news channels in business for decades. He governed in a way that was uniquely his own, often bypassing traditional media in favor of his trusty Twitter account. It was like having a president who live-tweeted his presidency. You always knew what he was thinking, sometimes in real time, often in all caps. And let's not forget the whole outsider appeal. For many, he represented a rejection of the establishment, a chance to shake things up. They saw him as someone who wasn't beholden to the usual political machinery, someone who would fight for them against the perceived elites. It was a powerful narrative, and it clearly struck a chord with a significant portion of the American population. Then, for years of this unprecedented presidency, came another election. And while he didn't win that round, he certainly didn't fade quietly into the political sunset. Nope, he pulled that aforementioned Grover Cleveland move, hinting at a comeback and maintaining a strong influence over a significant part of the Republican Party. It's like he left the stage, but the audience kept chanting his name for an encore. So, there you have it. The ongoing saga of Donald J. Trump, from real estate mogul to reality, TV star to President of the United States, and back again, sort of. It's a story that continues to unfold, full of twists, turns, and more talking points than you can shake a stick at. Whether you love him, hate him, or are just utterly bewildered by him, you can't deny that his journey has been anything but ordinary, and in the grand theater of American politics. He's definitely a character that keeps the audience on the edge of their seats, wondering what act will come next. Chapter 1. Family and Educational Light. Let's rewind the clock and journey back to the humble beginnings of our protagonist, the one and only Donald J. Trump. Picture Queens, New York, in the mid-20th century. A bustling borough where dreams were as big as the freshly baked bagels. It was here on June 14, 1946, that the future real estate magnate, reality TV star, and President of the United States made his grand entrance into the world. Fourth in a line of 5 offspring, young Donald was about to embark on a life less ordinary, a trajectory that would involve more gold plating than a pharaoh's tomb. Our story wouldn't be complete without mentioning the folks who set the stage for this larger-than-life character. Enter Fred Trump, the patriarch, a successful real estate developer with a work ethic that could put a tireless hamster on a wheel to shame. Fred wasn't just building buildings. He was instilling in his son a sense of drive and a keen eye for a good deal, or at least a deal that looked good. Imagine young Donald trailing after his dad on construction sites, probably wearing a tiny hard hat and already negotiating for a bigger sandbox. Then there was Mary Ann McLeod Trump, Donald's mother, a Scottish immigrant with a philanthropic heart. She was the one who brought a touch of elegance and perhaps a calming influence to the boisterous Trump household. One can imagine her trying to teach young Donald about the importance of sharing, only to have him declare that he was simply redistributing wealth to himself. The Trump siblings also played their part in shaping the future president. There was Mary Ann, who went on to become a respected U.S. Court of Appeals judge, a testament to the family's ambition. Though one might imagine lively debates around the dinner table about legal precedents versus gut feelings, Fred Jr., an airline pilot, sadly passed away young, a poignant reminder of life's fragility amidst the family's drive for success. Elizabeth became an administrative assistant at Chase Manhattan Bank, perhaps the most grounded of the bunch, patiently handling the paperwork, while the others chased bigger headlines. And then there was Robert, a businessman and investor who likely had a front-row seat to the unfolding Trump saga. Young Donald spent his formative years in the leafy neighborhood of Jamaica Estates in Queens. It was a place where kids probably played stickball in the streets and dreamed of hitting it big. For Donald, hitting it big likely involved imagining his name on every house in the neighborhood. Now, let's talk about the education of our protagonist. Up until the 7th grade, Donald attended the private Kew Forest School. One might picture a young Donald already displaying a certain assertiveness in the classroom, perhaps questioning the teacher's grading system or trying to negotiate extra recess time. Then came a pivotal moment in the Trump origin story. At the age of 13, he was sent to the New York Military Academy. This wasn't your average summer camp with arts and crafts. This was a place designed to instill discipline and structure. The official narrative suggests young Donald might have been a bit of a handful before this, a difficult child, as some accounts delicately put it. One can imagine the conversations leading up to this decision. Donald, perhaps a bit of marching and polishing shoes will do you good. The military academy years were, by all accounts, transformative. It was here that young Donald reportedly developed a competitive spirit that could rival a gladiator in the Colosseum. He also honed a certain directness in his interactions, which some might politely call assertive and others might describe with a slightly less charitable term. Let's just say he learned how to get what he wanted, and sometimes that involved a bit of metaphorical, or perhaps literal, pushing. After his stint in the military academy where he apparently excelled, naturally it was time for higher education. In 1964, Donald enrolled at Fordham University. 2 years later, however, he made a move that would become a key part of his personal mythology. He transferred to the prestigious Wharton School of Finance and Commerce at the University of Pennsylvania. This was the Ivy League, the big leagues of business education. Now, here's where our story takes a slightly humorous turn. Trump has often stated that he graduated top of his class at Wharton. It's a claim that adds a certain sheen to his business credentials. However, like a plot twist in a particularly engaging reality show, this claim has been met with a bit of skepticism. Records and recollections from classmates paint a slightly different picture. Some remember him as diligent and focused, while others recall him being less engaged in the academic rigors of Wharton. One can almost imagine the scene. Professor Higgins droning on about the intricacies of the stock market, while young Donald is already sketching out plans for his next real estate venture on the back of his notebook. Perhaps he was simply too busy thinking big to be bothered with the minutiae of academic theory. Interestingly, in his book The Art of the Deal, Trump himself downplayed the significance of his Wharton degree. It's almost as if he was saying, "Sure, I went to Wharton, but real success comes from instinct and making the right calls, and maybe putting your name in big letters on everything." Furthermore, accounts suggest that young Donald wasn't exactly Mr. Congeniality when it came to extracurricular activities. He wasn't leading the debate club or throwing legendary campus parties. He was, by many accounts, not particularly memorable to his fellow students. One might picture him as the guy who showed up for class, aced the exams or at least passed them, and then disappeared back into the world of his own burgeoning ambitions. The contrast between Trump's public pronouncements about his academic success at Wharton and the recollections of his peers and the school's records reveals a pattern of self-promotion and exaggeration that would become a hallmark of his career. This early divergence between reality and narrative suggests a deliberate construction of his public image, an emphasis on success and achievement. Even if the facts on the ground were a tad less spectacular, this tendency to inflate his accomplishments is a recurring theme in analysis of his life and career. It's almost as if he was operating under the mantra, "Why be merely successful when you can be tremendously successful, at least in the telling?" So, as we conclude this chapter of our story, we see the formative years of Donald J. Trump shaping a unique individual, the influence of his driven father, the grounding presence of his mother, the competitive environment of his siblings, the discipline of the military academy, and the perhaps slightly embellished academic experience at Wharton all played a role in creating the man who would eventually take the world stage. It's a story of ambition, drive, and a healthy dose of self-belief, a foundation upon which a truly extraordinary and often controversial career would be built. And as we move forward, we'll see how these early experiences laid the groundwork for the businessman, the reality TV star, and ultimately the politician who would redefine the American presidency in ways few could have ever imagined. Stay tuned, folks, because the Trump saga is just getting started. Chapter 2. Building an Empire. Business career, no? Let's dive back into the thrilling, slightly chaotic, and definitely gold-plated world of Donald Trump's business adventures. Think of it as a real-life game of Monopoly, but with way more dramatic bankruptcies and buildings that scrape the sky. Our tale resumes in 1968, when young Donald, armed with his Wharton degree and the unwavering belief that he aced every class, joined his dad's real estate gig, then a humble little operation called Trump Management. Fast forward a few years, and bam, he's the boss, rebranding it with the far more assertive Trump Organization. It's like going from selling lemonade on the corner to declaring yourself the CEO of global thirst quenchers overnight. Donald wasn't content with just the boroughs. He had his sights set on the bright lights and big deals of Manhattan, his first major move, transforming the slightly tired Commodore Hotel into the dazzling Grand Hyatt in 1980. Imagine the before and after. It's like a Cinderella story, but instead of a glass slipper, there's a giant Trump sign involved. Then came Trump Tower, a skyscraper that practically shouted, "Look at me! I'm tall, I'm shiny, and my name is Trump." It was completed in 1983 and instantly became a landmark, a testament to ambition, and a whole lot of brass. But wait, there's more. Our entrepreneurial hero wasn't one to limit himself. He ventured into the glittering high-stakes world of Atlantic City casinos. First, there was Harrah's at Trump Plaza, because why just have a plaza when you can have a Trump Plaza? Followed by the acquisition and renaming of the Atlantic City Hilton to the much more regal-sounding Trump Castle. And then, the granddaddy of them all, the Trump Taj Mahal, which opened in 1990. This place was so opulent, it probably had its own zip code and a dedicated team of chandelier polishers. Beyond the casinos and skyscrapers, Donald was busy building golf courses, because what's a tycoon without a place to swing a club? Resorts for when those high-stakes deals get a bit too stressful. And licensing his name to just about anything you can imagine: steaks, ties, even bottled water. It was like the Trump brand was trying to take over the world, one product at a time. And let's not forget his reign over the beauty pageant world. From Miss Universe to Miss Teen USA, Donald was the man in charge, offering his insightful commentary and probably ensuring the sashes were just the right shade of gold. Then came The Apprentice, the reality TV show that turned him into a household name and gave us the iconic phrase, "You're fired." It was like a weekly dose of business drama with a healthy serving of Trumpian flair. Now, here's where our story takes a slightly less glamorous, but no less entertaining, turn. The path to business success wasn't always smooth sailing. In fact, it involved a rather impressive number of bankruptcies. 6 companies, to be precise, between 1991 and 2009, including the Plaza Hotel and his various casino ventures. It was like watching a game of financial Jenga, where the tower kept wobbling and occasionally toppling over dot. At one point, he was reportedly over $3 billion in debt. That's a lot of zeros, folks. But did this deter our hero? Not a bit. He simply restructured, bounced back, and kept the Trump brand shining. It was like a financial Houdini act, constantly escaping from the clutches of debt. And let's not forget Trump University, which promised to teach the secrets of success, but ended up facing lawsuits and allegations of fraud. It was an educational experience. All right. Just maybe not the kind the students were hoping for. Despite these ups and downs, Donald Trump managed to maintain his image as a successful and wealthy businessman. His ability to brand himself and control the narrative was truly remarkable. He was like a master illusionist, always managing to pull off the trick of appearing incredibly successful, even when the financial reality was a bit more complicated. His resilience and branding prowess were key to his later foray into politics. The image of the savvy businessman resonated with many voters who were looking for a fresh approach. It was like saying, "This guy knows how to make money. Maybe he can do the same for the country." Of course, we can't forget the role of his father, Fred Trump, who provided early financial support and valuable connections. It wasn't entirely a solo journey to the top. There was a strong foundation laid by the previous generation, so the business career of Donald J. Trump was a wild ride, a mix of audacious ventures, impressive branding, and a few bumps in the road. But through it all, he managed to build an empire and occasionally have to rebuild parts of it, all while keeping his name firmly in the spotlight. And this fascinating journey through the world of commerce would ultimately set the stage for his most surprising and headline adventure yet, his entry into the world of politics. But that's a story for another chapter. Chapter 3. Entering the political era unaware, talking a saga so full of twists and turns, it makes a pretzel look like a straight line. Think of his political affiliations as a wardrobe with more costume changes than a Broadway show. One minute he's rocking the Republican red. The next he's trying on some independent chic, followed by a brief flirtation with Democratic blue, and then back to Republican red, with a few unaffiliated intermission outfits thrown in for good. Measured dot, our story truly kicks off in 1987. When our protagonist, then known primarily for his real estate swagger and burgeoning brand, decided to don the Republican colors. Perhaps he saw the GOP as the natural habitat for a successful businessman, the party where ambition and gold-plated dreams could truly flourish. Picture a young Donald, maybe sporting a slightly different shade of tan, attending his first Republican fundraiser, probably critiquing and suggesting they add more chandeliers. In 1999, he surprised many by switching to the Independent Party of New York. Was he feeling like a political maverick, a lone wolf howling at the partisan moon? Or maybe he just wanted to keep his options open, like a savvy negotiator refusing to commit too early in the game. Imagine him at an Independent Party meeting, possibly suggesting they rebrand with a more powerful color scheme, like gold. Then came the plot twist no one saw coming. In 2001, he became a Democrat. Cue the dramatic music. Was this a genuine ideological shift? Did he suddenly find himself agreeing with the donkey on key issues? Or was it a strategic move in the political landscape of New York? Picture him at a Democratic fundraiser, perhaps offering tips on how to build bigger and better infrastructure projects with his name on them, of course. But the Democratic dalliance was as fleeting as a summer romance. By 2009, he was back in the comforting embrace of the Republican Party, Perhaps he realized that his core constituency lay within the GOP, or maybe the Democratic blue just didn't quite match his complexion. Imagine the headline: Trump returns. 2 Republican roots, claims elephant has greatest genes. And the indecisiveness wasn't over. Between 2011 and 2012, he briefly registered as unaffiliated once more. Was he conducting a political focus group of one, enjoying the freedom of not having to toe any party line? Picture him at a political debate declaring, "I'm not with them or them. I'm with the people and myself." Ultimately, he found his way back to the Republican Party, and this time it seemed to stick. This final alignment would prove to be the runway for his presidential ambitions to truly take flight. Now, let's rewind a bit to 2004. During his Democratic-leaning phase, his comment about possibly agreeing more with Democrats on economic issues is particularly intriguing in retrospect. Imagine the conversations. These Democrats, they might be onto something with this whole economy thing. Maybe we should build a really, really big economy, the best economy. Everyone agrees. The irony, of course, is that his later economic policies and rhetoric were firmly rooted in Republican principles. But the seeds of presidential ambition were sown long before his official runs. As early as the late 1980s, the idea of President Trump was apparently percolating in his mind. Picture a younger, perhaps slightly less orange-toned, Donald gazing out over his empire, thinking, "This is great, but you know what would be even greater, being in charge of everything?" His 1987 newspaper ad criticizing Reagan's foreign policy was a bold declaration of his political awareness and perhaps ego. It was like a rookie quarterback telling the legendary coach how he should be calling the plays. Imagine the reaction in Washington. Polite amusement mixed with a healthy dose of "who does this guy think he is?" His flirtation with the Reform Party in 1999 for the 2000 election was a truly bizarre and fascinating episode. The Reform Party, a brainchild of Ross Perot, was a quirky mix of fiscal conservatism and social liberalism. Picture Donald trying to find common ground with the Reform Party platform, perhaps suggesting they add a few more gold-plated policies. His eventual withdrawal suggests that maybe the fit just wasn't right. Or perhaps he realized that the Reform Party wasn't quite the vehicle to carry him to the White House. The consideration of a 2004 run also adds to the narrative of his long-term aspirations. The political landscape in 2004 was dominated by the aftermath of 9/11s and the Iraq War. One can only speculate what a Trump candidacy in that environment would have looked like. Then came 2012, the year the presidential whispers turned into serious speculation. His public pronouncements and his first speech at CPAC signaled his serious intentions within the Republican Party. The conservative base was starting to take notice of this unconventional figure, who spoke their language and wasn't afraid to ruffle feathers. And then, the road to 2016 truly began, paved in part by the birtherism conspiracy theory. This controversial stance, questioning Barack Obama's birthplace, propelled Trump into the heart of the Republican political discourse and galvanized a significant segment of the electorate. It was a strategy that was both highly effective in gaining attention and deeply divisive. The New York Times theory about Obama's jokes at the 2011 White House Correspondents' Dinner is a particularly delicious piece of political lore. Imagine the scene, the elegant ballroom, the witty banter, and President Obama delivering a series of zingers at Trump's expense. Now, picture Trump in the audience, perhaps with a forced smile, secretly thinking, "You just wait. I'll have the last laugh." From the Oval Office, it's a narrative that adds a personal, almost petty motivation to his presidential run, making the whole story even more captivating. Finally, the day arrived, June 16th, 2015, the Golden Escalator. The dramatic announcement, the Make America Great Again hats. It was a moment that seemed almost surreal, the culmination of decades of ambition and a lifetime of building a brand. Looking back at his political evolution, it's hard not to see a certain pragmatism at play. Trump seemed to approach politics, not from a deeply entrenched ideological standpoint, but rather from a perspective of what would work best for him at any given moment. It's a strategy that might raise eyebrows among traditional politicians, but certainly proved effective for him. His lack of consistent party loyalty suggests a political ideology that is more fluid and adaptable than most. He wasn't bound by traditional party dogma, allowing him to appeal to a wider range of voters and to shift his positions as needed. It was a political tightrope walk, but he managed to stay on most of the time. Ultimately, his decision to fully embrace the Republican Party was the key to his presidential success. The GOP, seeking a charismatic figure to energize their base, found their man in Donald J. Trump and the long history of him considering a run for president. Dating all the way back to the 1980s, paints a picture of a man with a long-held ambition. For the highest office, his 2016 candidacy wasn't a sudden whim. It was the result of decades of political interest and an unwavering belief in his own ability to win, even against all odds. It was a slow burn of ambition that finally ignited. On that golden escalator, forever changing the landscape of American politics. Chapter 4. Unusual Campaign. The 2016 presidential electioner show began, as we know at Trump Tower, a monument to his own brand. The announcement itself was less of a traditional political speech and more of a theatrical performance. Picture the scene: the escalator descent, the waving crowd, the barrage of pronouncements delivered with the conviction of a man who believed every word, and probably a few extra words he just thought of. The Make America Great Again slogan was unveiled, a phrase so simple yet so potent it was like the political equivalent of a catchy jingle that gets stuck in your head for days. And the promise to sell, that was the ultimate mic drop, suggesting he was beholden to no one but himself, and maybe his own mirror. His key campaign promises were like a greatest hits album of populist themes. The wall on the border wasn't just a wall, it was a symbol. A promise to protect America from, well, whoever needed protecting from, depending on the day. Renegotiating trade deals became his mantra. Like he was personally going to sit down with every world leader and say, "You're doing it wrong." And the pledge to repeal and replace Obamacare. That was a promise so frequently repeated, it practically became a campaign theme song, albeit one without a catchy melody. His rhetoric was a masterclass in grabbing attention, even if it often left a trail of bewildered pundits in its wake. He spoke directly, often bypassing the usual filters and niceties of political discourse. It was like watching a stand-up comedian who had wandered onto the political stage and decided to just say whatever was on his mind. Consequences be damned. And let's not forget the nicknames. Crooked Hillary, Lion Ted, Little Marco. They were like political branding at its most direct. The Republican primaries were like a reality show elimination contest, with Trump as the seemingly unstoppable host, he faced a crowded field of seasoned politicians, many of whom had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. But Trump, with his unconventional style and unwavering confidence, steamrolled through them one by one. Jeb Bush, the establishment favorite, was dispatched with surprising ease. Ted Cruz, despite his intellectual firepower, couldn't quite crack the Trump code. Marco Rubio, once seen as the future of the party, found himself on the receiving end of some rather memorable Trumpian barbs. It was like watching a political David and Goliath story, except in this version, David had a Twitter account and a knack for catchy slogans. The Republican National Convention was, well, it was definitely a spectacle. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of fervent support and lingering unease from some corners of the party. Trump's acceptance speech was a defining moment, laying out his vision for America and solidifying his position as the leader of the GOP, at least for now. And his choice of Mike Pence as his running mate added an interesting dynamic to the ticket. Pence, with his more traditional conservative credentials, was seen by some as a stabilizing force, a counterweight to Trump's often unpredictable nature. It was like pairing a roller coaster with a very steady train. An intriguing combination. The general election against Hillary Clinton was a battle for the ages, a clash of two vastly different figures representing two starkly different visions for America. The debates were must-see television filled with sharp exchanges, one-liners, and moments that would be dissected and replayed for years to come. Key events, like the FBI investigation into Clinton's emails and the release of the Access Hollywood tape, added layers of drama and uncertainty to an already unpredictable race. And the electoral map, it was a nail-biter, with states flipping and the outcome remaining uncertain until the very end. Trump's victory, despite losing the popular vote, highlighted the complexities of the American electoral system and sparked countless debates about its fairness and effectiveness. The controversies of the campaign were like a never-ending news cycle. His comments on race and immigration drew widespread condemnation, but also resonated with a segment of the electorate who felt their concerns were not being addressed by the mainstream. Accusations of inciting violence at his rallies were frequent, with critics pointing to his rhetoric as contributing to a climate of division. The Access Hollywood tape, with its crude and offensive language, threatened to derail his campaign, entirely leading to a flurry of endorsements being withdrawn. And his initial reluctance to explicitly condemn the KKK after receiving their endorsement was a moment that many found deeply troubling. Yet through it all, his core supporters remained steadfast, often viewing the controversies as evidence of his willingness to speak his mind and challenge the status quo. The unconventional nature of his campaign was its defining characteristic. He effectively used his outsider status to his advantage, portraying himself as the only one who could truly bring about change. His rallies were less like traditional political events and more like passionate gatherings of like-minded individuals who felt they had finally found a voice. And his use of social media, particularly Twitter, was revolutionary. He could bypass the traditional media narrative, communicate directly with his followers, and set the agenda with a single tweet. It was a level of control over the message that no presidential candidate had ever wielded before. The Make America Great Again. The slogan was more than just a catchy phrase. It tapped into a deep-seated feeling of nostalgia and a desire for a return to a perceived golden age. It resonated with voters who felt that America had lost its way, and that Trump was the man to lead them back to greatness. It was a powerful message that transcended policy details and spoke directly to the emotions and aspirations of a significant portion of the American electorate. In conclusion, the 2016 presidential campaign of Donald J. Trump was a political phenomenon that defied all expectations. It was a chaotic, controversial, and ultimately successful endeavor that rewrote the rules of American politics. It demonstrated the power of unconventional strategies, the impact of social media, and the enduring appeal of a message that promises to restore a sense of national pride. Whether you loved it or loathed it, one thing was undeniable. Election was a turning point in American history, and the campaign that led to it was a story that will be told and analyzed for generations to come. Chapter 5. First Term, Policy and Presidency, 201-72021. All right, folks, grab your favorite beverage and maybe a stress ball, because we're about to dive headfirst into the whirlwind that was Donald J. Trump's first term as President of the United States, 201-72021. It was a period marked by so much policy-shifting, event-packed, and controversial late in action. It felt like someone had put the entire American government on fast forward with the occasional dramatic pause for a tweet. Picture this, the reality. TV star has just moved into the White House. It's like if your favorite sitcom character suddenly became the CEO of a major corporation. You knew things were going to get interesting, and probably a little bit chaotic. On the domestic front, President Trump wasted no time making his mark. First up was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, a piece of legislation so complex, even tax accountants probably needed a nap after reading it. The general idea was to cut taxes, especially for corporations, with the promise that it would trickle down like a rogue sprinkler system. Whether it rained on everyone equally is still a topic of lively debate. He also oversaw a significant rollback of federal regulations, which was music to the ears of some industries and a source of concern for others, who suddenly felt like the guardrails had been removed from the highway. Appointments. Trump managed to fill 3 vacancies with Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, shifting the court's ideological balance in a way that had long-lasting implications. It was like a game of judicial Jenga, and Trump managed to place his blocks with remarkable precision. The Trump administration also implemented a travel ban on citizens from several Muslim-majority countries, a move that sparked immediate protests and legal challenges. The border wall with Mexico, a signature campaign promise, saw some expansion. Although whether Mexico ultimately paid for it remains a punchline in many political jokes. The zero-tolerance policy at the border led to family separations, a deeply controversial practice that drew widespread condemnation. However, it wasn't all contentious. Trump also signed the First Step Act, a bipartisan effort aimed at criminal justice reform and addressing the opioid crisis. It was a moment of unexpected unity in a highly polarized political landscape. And let's not forget the establishment of the United States Space Force. Yes, you read that right. America now has its own dedicated branch of the military, focused on the cosmos. One can only imagine the recruitment slogans. Join the Space Force. Our Wi-Fi is out of this world. Turning our attention to foreign policy, President Trump was determined to shake things up. He renegotiated trade agreements with Mexico and Canada, replacing NAFTA with the USMCA, a deal that was touted as being much better. Just ask him, similar. Trade spats and renegotiations occurred with China, Japan, and South Korea. He also made waves by withdrawing the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership (TPP) and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, decisions that were met with dismay by many international partners. In a significant move in the Middle East, the Trump administration relocated the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a move celebrated by Israel but criticized by Palestinians. They also brokered the Abraham Accords, a series of agreements that normalized relations between Israel and several Arab nations, a diplomatic achievement that surprised many. And who could forget the historic meetings with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un? It was like a diplomatic reality show, with two unlikely leaders engaging in unprecedented face-to-face talks. On a more serious note, the Trump administration also oversaw the operation that led to the killing of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. But the first term wasn't just about policy. It was also a roller coaster of events and controversies. President Trump was impeached by the House of Representatives in 2019 for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress related to his dealings with Ukraine. However, he was acquitted by the Senate in 2020 in a vote that largely followed party lines. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic, which dominated the latter part of his term. The administration's response, including downplaying the severity of the virus and promoting unproven treatments, drew heavy criticism. The CARES Act, a massive economic relief package, was passed with bipartisan support, providing much-needed aid, but also raising questions about its long-term impact. The 2020 presidential election saw Trump lose to Joe Biden. That shocked many. Trump refused to concede, claiming widespread voter fraud without providing credible evidence. This culminated in the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, a day that will forever be etched in American history. In the aftermath, Trump was impeached by the House for a second time, charged with inciting insurrection, but was again acquitted by the Senate, looking back at his first term. It's clear that President Trump made a concerted effort to reverse many of the policies of his predecessor, Barack Obama. This reflected a significant ideological shift and a desire to dismantle the legacy of the previous administration. This pattern of policy reversal highlighted the stark ideological differences between the two administrations and the impact of presidential transitions on the direction of the U.S. government. The two impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump underscored the deep partisan divisions in American politics during his presidency and the seriousness of the allegations brought forth by the House of Representatives. While he was acquitted in both trials, these events represent significant moments of political crises and scrutiny of his conduct in office. In short, Donald Trump's first term was a 4-year period that felt more like a decade crammed into a time machine. It was a presidency defined by bold policy changes, unconventional diplomacy, and a constant barrage of controversies that kept the world watching and often wondering what would happen next. It was a truly unique chapter in American history, and one that continues to be debated and analyzed to this day. Chapter 6. Between two terms. Continuing activities and influence. Picture this, January 2021. The White House keys have been handed over. The presidential jet has flown off into the sunset, or maybe towards a golf course in Florida. And our protagonist, Donald J. Trump, has taken up residence in the sunny climes of Mar-a-Lago and Palm Beach. It was like a reality show star returning to their mansion after a particularly dramatic season finale. Except this time, the season finale involved leaving the most powerful office in the world. But don't think for a second that our story ends there. Oh no, this is Donald Trump we're talking about. Even in post-presidency, he's a headline-generating machine. First order of business, facing his second impeachment trial in the Senate. It was like a sequel no one quite asked for, tuned in to see how it would play out. Spoiler alert, he was acquitted again. Then came the digital exile. Following the events of January 6th, the major social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook decided to give him the virtual boot. It was like taking away a superhero's cape. How would he communicate his thoughts to the masses? Never fear, for in the land of tech startups, a new platform was born. Truth Social. Imagine the pitch meeting. It's like Twitter, but with even more truth. The actual amount of truth may vary. Despite being off the official political stage, Trump remained very much in the game. He became the kingmaker, or a kingbreaker, depending on who you ask, of the Republican Party, endorsing and campaigning for candidates he favored. It was like having the ultimate celebrity endorsement, except this celebrity could also launch 1,000 tweets at your opponent. He also continued his running commentary on President Biden and the Democrats, ensuring that his voice remained a constant presence in the political discourse. It was like he'd left the building. But his tweets were still echoing in the halls of power. And then, the moment many had been anticipating or dreading, depending on their political persuasion, in November 2022, he announced his candidacy. The Republican nomination in the 2024 presidential election, it was like the return of a beloved or reviled character in a long-running series. You knew things were about to get interesting again. But the post-presidency wasn't all rallies and endorsements. Trump also faced a series of legal challenges, including a criminal indictment in Manhattan. It was like a legal drama unfolding in real time, adding another layer of intrigue to the ongoing Trump saga. The period after his presidency has truly highlighted Donald Trump's continued dominance within the Republican Party, even without the power of the Oval Office. His endorsements hold significant weight, and his influence can sway primary elections. It's like he's become the de facto leader of a significant faction of the party, his presence looming large over every decision and every election. This demonstrates the lasting impact of his presidency on the Republican political landscape, a testament to his ability to connect with and mobilize a dedicated base of supporters. In essence, Donald Trump's time between his first and potential second terms has been anything but quiet. He's remained a central figure in American politics, continuing to shape the Republican Party and keeping his name firmly in the headlines. It's like he took a break from the main show, only to star in a series of highly rated spin-offs, ensuring that the Trump narrative remains a captivating and often humorous, in a slightly bewildered way, part of the American story. The political world, it seems, just can't quit him. Chapter 7. Second Chance. The 2024 Presidential Election Mullet. Buckle up your time-traveling DeLorean, folks, because we're about to journey into a hypothetical 2024, where the political winds blew in a very familiar direction. It seems our man Donald J. Trump decided that one term in the White House just wasn't enough. And like a rock star returning for an encore, or maybe a seventh encore, he threw his hat back into the ring. The Republican primaries. Well, let's just say it wasn't exactly a nail-biter. Trump sailed through them with the ease of a seasoned golfer on a perfectly manicured green. His choice for running mate, the one and only J.D. Vance. Imagine the campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again." Again, with a side of Vance. Now, The Democratic side of the aisle took a bit of an unexpected turn in this alternate reality. Initially, it was shaping up to be a rematch of Biden and Harris. But plot twist, Biden apparently decided to hang up his political gloves, leaving Kamala Harris to step into the top spot, with Tim Walz joining her as the VP candidate. It was like a sudden change in the reality TV show lineup, keeping everyone on their toes. Trump's campaign for this second hypothetical term focused on the tried and true themes: immigration still promising that big, beautiful wall, presumably with even more gold accents this time, tax reform, because who doesn't love talking about taxes? Tariffs making trade great again, one tariff at a time, and the ever-popular reduction of federal regulations freeing the American spirit. One less rule at a time, and then came November 2024. The results rolled in, and lo and behold, Donald J. Trump had done it again. He reportedly defeated Vice President Kamala Harris, securing a comfortable 312 electoral votes and even winning the popular vote this time around. It was like lightning striking twice, or perhaps the political equivalent of a comeback album topping the charts, and at this point, he would have officially become the oldest person ever elected president, proving that age is just a number, especially when that number is followed by President of the United States. The fact that Donald Trump could win a second term, despite a first term that was, shall we say, eventful, and even with a fictional in this scenario, criminal conviction hanging over his head, really highlights the enduring support of his base. It suggests a significant shift in the American political landscape, a deep-seated dissatisfaction among a large portion of the electorate with the direction of the country, and a continued belief in Trump's leadership and vision. It's like a political magic trick, defying expectations and leaving many wondering, how did he do that? So, in this hypothetical 2024, Donald Trump once again found himself heading back to the White House, ready for another 4 years of, well, whatever the Trump presidency entails. It's a scenario that underscores the unpredictable nature of politics and the enduring power of a personality that knows how to capture the attention of the nation, for better or for, often hilariously, more complicated. Chapter 8, Second Term, Setting a New Direction 2025 Present. All right, folks, welcome back to The Trump Show, Season 2. Our man against all, and perhaps some legal odds, has once again taken the oath of office, becoming the 47th President of the United States on January 20th, 2025. Now, let's not forget, he did so with a fictional, as of my last update, conviction under his belt. Though, thankfully for him, it came with a get-out-of-jail-free card in the form of a non-sentence. Talk about a dramatic entrance. His second term kicked off with the kind of decisive action you'd expect from someone who believes in hitting the ground running or perhaps power walking. First up, a flurry of pardons for around 1,500 of those folks involved in the January 6th events. It was like hitting the reset button on a particularly rowdy party. Next came the unveiling of a brand new government agency, the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Yes, you read that right. One can only imagine the internal memos. Memo to all federal employees: prepare to be efficient. Woof, woof. Through DOGE, President Trump initiated what could only be described as a federal employee fire sale, with mass firings echoing through the halls of bureaucracy. It was like a reality show where the catchphrase wasn't "you're fired," but "you're efficiently separated." And because one trade war just isn't enough, President Trump decided to reignite the tensions with our friendly neighbors to the north and south, launching new trade battles with Mexico and Canada. It was like realizing you forgot to stir the pot of international relations, so you grab a really big spoon and give it a good whirl. His key policy priorities for this second term were classic Trump: ending those endless wars, presumably by declaring victory and coming home. Mission accomplished. Securing the border that wall wasn't going to build itself again. Unleashing the potential of the American economy. More tax cuts, and stopping those pesky radical policies, whatever those might specifically entail on any given Tuesday, closing parenthesis. Remember the Remain in Mexico policy. Well, it made a triumphant return, like a beloved character in a rebooted TV series. President Trump also declared a national emergency on energy, because apparently we needed even more energy, and he took swift action to ramp up domestic production. Think of it as America hitting the energy drink aisle hard. The Paris Agreement on climate change gone again. It was like breaking up with an international agreement for the second time, just to be sure. And those diversity, equity, and inclusion day programs in government organizations. They were deemed surplus to requirements and swiftly prioritized for termination. It was like Marie Kondoing, the federal government. But instead of asking if something sparked joy, they asked if it aligned with the MAGA agenda. In a move that raised more than a few eyebrows and probably sparked some lively debates on cable news. President Trump issued an executive order officially stating that there are only two biological genders, male and female. It was a declaration that certainly made headlines and solidified his stance on social issues. And finally, in a move that likely sent shivers down the spines of anyone involved in those pesky legal cases from the past, President Trump appointed Pam Bondi as Attorney General. This was swiftly followed by the dismissal of several prosecutors who had been involved in cases against him. It was like hitting the undo button on the legal system, with a distinctly Trumpian flourish. These early actions in President Trump's second term paint a picture of rapid and decisive implementation of his campaign promises, often executed with the stroke of a pen through executive orders. It's a style of governing that emphasizes a strong executive branch, where the president sets the agenda and expects things to happen quickly. The establishment of DOGE signals a significant effort to reshape the federal bureaucracy, a clear indication of his desire to streamline government, or at least make it more aligned with his vision, and the return of trade wars with Canada and Mexico, despite the previous negotiation of the USMCA, suggests a deeply ingrained protectionist stance and a willingness to disrupt established agreements in pursuit of prioritizing domestic industries, even if it strains international relations. So, there you have it. The opening chapters of the hypothetical second Trump presidency. It's a whirlwind of executive actions, policy reversals, and a clear commitment to fulfilling the promises that got him back into the Oval Office. What adventures and likely controversies await in the rest of this term? Only time, and perhaps a few more tweets, will tell. Chapter 9. Controversy, legal battles, and public perception. Folks, let's not pretend that the Trump story is all sunshine and rainbows, unless we're talking about the color of some of his career, both in the boardroom and the Oval Office, has been marked by a veritable parade of controversies and enough legal battles to keep a whole team of lawyers in fancy suits for decades. Even way back in the disco era of the 1970s, when his hair was, well, different, he was facing accusations of racial discrimination in his real estate dealings. Talk about starting your career with a bang and a lawsuit. Then came the business bankruptcies, which we've already touched on. Think of them as dramatic plot twists in the ongoing saga of his financial empire. And who could forget the 2 impeachments during his first term? Those were like the cliffhangers at the end of a particularly dramatic season of his presidency, keeping everyone guessing about what would happen next. Spoiler, he got acquitted both times. The charges ranged from obstruction of justice to abuse of power, serious stuff, even if it played out with a certain theatrical flair. Now, fast forward to our hypothetical 2024, where our man again, fictionally, as of my last knowledge update, found himself on the wrong end of a criminal verdict, convicted of falsifying business records. It was like a plot twist in a legal thriller, adding another layer of complexity to his already colorful history. And if that wasn't enough legal drama, he also again, hypothetically, faced defeat in civil lawsuits related to sexual assault. And defamation? It seems the legal eagles have been kept quite busy in the Trump orbit. Public perception of our protagonist has been, to put it mildly, polarized. It's like asking a room full of people whether they prefer coffee or tea. You're bound to get some very strong opinions on both sides. He's been frequently accused of making, shall we say, alternative facts, and promoting conspiracy theories that would make even the most imaginative sci-fi writer raise an eyebrow, and his communication style often delivered via tweet storms and rallies that felt more like rock concerts has certainly been divisive. You either loved his directness or wished he'd invest in a good editor. The sheer volume and variety of these controversies and legal challenges are a defining characteristic of Donald Trump's public life. It's like a never-ending news cycle dedicated solely to his latest escapades. Yet, despite this constant scrutiny and these repeated legal battles, his political success hasn't been derailed. This speaks to the resilience he seems to possess in the face of negative press and the unwavering support he enjoys from a significant portion of the electorate. He's also shown a remarkable willingness to engage in aggressive legal strategies, perhaps viewing the courtroom as just another arena where he can negotiate and, hopefully, come out on top the consistently polarized public opinion. Surrounding Donald Trump highlights the deep divisions within the American electorate. There are strong, often diametrically opposed views on his leadership, his policies, and his personal character. This polarization has had a significant impact on American politics, contributing to social and political fragmentation and making it increasingly difficult to build consensus on key issues. It's like everyone's watching a different channel of the same reality show, and they can't agree on who the good guys and the bad guys are. In conclusion, the story of Donald Trump wouldn't be complete without acknowledging the constant swirl of controversies, the numerous legal battles, and the deeply divided public perception that have followed him throughout his career. It's a narrative filled with drama, unexpected twists, and a level of scrutiny that few public figures ever face. Whether these controversies ultimately define his legacy remains to be seen, but they have certainly been an undeniable and often captivating aspect of his time in the spotlight. Chapter 10. Trumpism Ideology and Political Views Now. Let's try to unpack the fascinating, often perplexing, and definitely meme-worthy phenomenon known as Trumpism. Think of it as a political potluck where the main dishes are right-wing populism, a hearty serving of nationalism, a dollop of anti-globalism, and just a sprinkle, or maybe a generous helping, depending on your perspective, of a certain, let's call it, assertive leadership. The core tenets of this Trumpism are as distinctive as a certain former president's hairstyle. First, You've got the right-wing populism, which is all about championing the forgotten folks, the salt-of-the-earth types who feel like the establishment has left them behind. It's like a political underdog story, except the underdog often flies in a private jet. Then there's the nationalism, which is less about quiet patriotism and more about shouting America first from the rooftops and maybe slapping a tariff on anything that isn't made in the USA. It's like your country declaring itself the winner of the best country ever competition. Regardless of what the other contestants think, anti-GLOBALISM is another key ingredient, with a healthy skepticism towards international agreements and a preference for going it alone. Think of it as America saying, "Thanks, but we've got this," even if this involves renegotiating every trade deal ever made. And let's not forget that certain level of, let's just say, confident decision-making, which some might interpret as a touch of authoritarianism. It's like having a CEO who doesn't believe in committees and prefers to make all the big calls himself, often via tweet. When it comes to specific policies, Trumpism generally favors protectionist trade measures, like tariffs, to bring back American jobs, even if those jobs now involve robots. It also advocates for reduced immigration, often with a focus on building walls and tightening borders. And on the social front, it generally aligns with a socially conservative agenda, though perhaps with a more populist and less traditionally religious flavor. The America First mantra is the guiding principle here. Applied to both domestic and foreign policy, it's like a national version of putting yourself first in every situation, even if it means occasionally stepping on a few international toes. And the rhetoric? Oh, the rhetoric. It's often populist, directly targeting the political establishment, the elites, and anyone perceived as being out of touch with the real America. It's like a political stand-up routine where the punchlines are aimed at the perceived enemies of the people. Interestingly, Trump's views on various issues, like climate change, once called a hoax, healthcare, always promising a better, cheaper plan that never quite materialized, and social issues have evolved over time. It's like his political compass occasionally spins a bit, before settling on a direction that seems to resonate with his base at that particular moment. On education, Trumpism tends to favor school choice, empowering parents to send their kids to the schools they deem best, and emphasizes local control. It also generally opposes things like tenure for teachers and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Day programs in government organizations, viewing them as potentially hindering meritocracy, as defined by, well, you can guess. What makes Trumpism particularly noteworthy is how it differs from traditional conservative ideology in several key areas, especially trade and foreign policy. The traditional GOP often championed free trade and a more interventionist foreign policy, whereas Trumpism leans towards a more nationalist and populist approach in these domains. It's like the Republican Party got a makeover, trading in its old-school blazer for a more, shall we say, attention-grabbing jacket. This ideological shift has had a profound impact on the Republican Party. Many candidates and politicians have embraced elements of Trumpism in an effort to court his loyal base of supporters. It's like everyone's trying to learn the latest dance craze, hoping to get noticed by the head of the party, who also happens to have some pretty strong opinions on music. And finally, Donald Trump's own frequently changing political views throughout his career suggest a flexible and perhaps opportunistic approach to ideology. He seems to prioritize political expediency and what will resonate with his target audience at any given time. This adaptability has allowed him to connect with a diverse range of voters and maintain relevance across different political cycles. It's like he's got a political chameleon suit, changing colors to blend in or stand out as needed. In the end, Trumpism represents a significant and influential force in contemporary American politics. It's a unique blend of ideas and approaches that has reshaped the Republican Party and continues to spark debate and discussion across the political spectrum. Whether you love it, hate it, or are just trying to figure out what it all means, Trumpism is a political phenomenon that's hard to ignore. Chapter 11. A transformative figure. Impact and legacy right. Folks, let's take one last, slightly bewildered, and definitely amused look at the Trump phenomenon and try to figure out what it all meant. Was he a political game changer, or just a really loud player with some shiny pieces? Well, the answer, as with most things Trump, is probably a bit of both, served with a side of, you can't make this stuff up. Donald Trump strutted into the presidency as the ultimate outsider, a businessman who'd never spent a day in elected office or worn a military uniform, unless you count that time he wore a bomber jacket. He then proceeded to make history by becoming the only president to get the impeachment two-step not just once, but twice. That's like getting a bonus round in the game of political hard knocks. And in our little hypothetical world, he even managed to snag the title of the first former U.S. president with a felony conviction. Talk about a unique selling point for the history books. He didn't just join the Republican Party, he gave it a full-on makeover, dragging it, kicking and screaming, or perhaps cheering loudly, depending on who you ask, towards a more populist and nationalist direction. It was like the GOP traded its sensible shoes for a pair of gold-plated sneakers. He also had a knack for politely ignoring political norms, treating them like suggestions rather than rules, and challenging democratic institutions with the enthusiasm of a toddler. Discovering a new toy that might or might not break, his presidency was like a masterclass in how to divide a nation. It felt like everyone picked a side, dug in their heels, and prepared for a never-ending debate. He certainly knew how to command attention, and his use of Twitter was like a direct line to the American psyche, unfiltered and often surprising. He also oversaw some pretty significant policy changes in areas like taxes, trade, and the environment. The kind of things that keep policy wonks up at night and provide endless fodder for cable news. Some historians even see his election as a major turning point, a big nope to the establishment, and a sign of a fundamental shift in American politics. So, when we look back at the Trump years, what's the takeaway? Well, it's clear that his presidency had a profound and lasting impact on the United States. It wasn't just about the policies. It was about the way he communicated, the norms he shattered, and the way he reshaped one of America's major political parties. His influence is still being felt. Like a catchy song you can't quite get out of your head, was he a transformative figure? Absolutely. Was it controversial? You betcha. His legacy is likely to be debated and analyzed for years to come, but one thing is undeniable. Donald J. Trump was a force to be reckoned with, a unique character who left an indelible mark on the American story. And in the grand, often bizarre theater of American politics, his was certainly a performance that won't soon be forgotten. The end, for now, perhaps. But in the world of Trump, you never really know what the next act might be. Conclusioner's story begins in the outer boroughs of New York, where young Donald, armed with ambition and a Wharton degree or so the legend goes, set out to conquer the world, one real estate deal at a time. From the humble beginnings of the Trump Organization to the glitzy heights of casinos and entertainment, he built an empire that screamed his name in big, shiny letters. And then, just when you thought he'd peaked, he decided to become a reality TV star, turning "You're fired" into a national catchphrase. It was like he was collecting career achievements like they were stamps. But wait, there's more. In a plot twist that nobody saw coming, except maybe him, this businessman turned TV personality decided to try his hand at politics. And wouldn't you know it, he actually won. The 2016 election saw him, a complete political novice, ascend to the highest office in the land. His first term was, shall we say, a roller coaster of policy changes, international incidents, and enough drama to keep the cable news networks in business for years. And let's not forget those 2 impeachment adventures just for kicks. After a brief hiatus, or as brief as it could be for someone like him, our man staged a comeback in the hypothetical 2024 election, proving that in the world of Trump, retirement is just a suggestion. He became one of the rare presidents to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, like a political boomerang that just kept coming back. His second term, as we've discussed, started with the kind of decisive action that makes headlines and keeps everyone on their toes. But the Trump story wouldn't be complete without mentioning the constant swirl of controversies, the legal battles, and the public opinion that's been more divided than a pizza at a family gathering. Despite all the challenges, his influence on American politics is undeniable. He reshaped the Republican Party in his own image and contributed to a level of partisan division that could probably power a small city. So, what's the final verdict on Donald J. Trump? Well, his legacy is still being written, but it's pretty clear that he's left a mark on the American political landscape that's about as subtle as a giant gold-plated T on a skyscraper. He's been a transformative figure, a disruptor, and a constant source of conversation, and often bewilderment. Love him or loathe him, Donald J. Trump has certainly had a remarkable career, and his story is one that will likely be told, and retold for generations to come. It's been quite a ride, folks, a truly unique chapter in the ongoing, often hilarious, and always captivating saga of American history. Well, folks, that's the whirlwind tour through the Trumpiverse. Hopefully, you now have a slightly clearer, or maybe just more entertained understanding of who this fascinating and often bewildering figure is. If you enjoyed this story-driven dive into the world of towering ambitions and even taller headlines, don't be shy. Give that like button a good OL tap. It helps us keep the lights on and maybe even afford a gold-plated microphone someday. And if you want more engaging stories to help you level up your English, hit that subscribe button. We promise to keep the tales coming, and who knows, maybe we'll even tackle the biography of the inventor of the spray tan next. Finally, if you know someone who's ever scratched their head and asked, "Wait, who is this Trump guy?" then share this video with them. You'll be doing them and us a solid. Thanks for hanging out, and until our next story adventure, stay curious and keep those English learning gears turning. Cheers!